What up guys, Sven here. I've been very excited about the upcoming Prismata balance patch. Lunark just posted the patch notes on their blog, and I'm going to be going through every unit one by one and reviewing it. So let's hop right into this. First of all, the unit I infamously hate, and a lot of other players do as well, Wild Drone, is now being basically cut in half into a single drone rather than a double drone. And it now costs 2 in an energy, build time of 2 HP, and produces 1 gold. Now, I really love this change. It's probably my favorite change of the entire upcoming patch. Wild Drone before, I'll put a picture of the current Wild Drone on the screen for reference, but it's 5 EE, and the effect that a double drone has on the Prismata balance is basically that, of course, it has to be more efficient to compensate for being bundled together, right? But then, because of the efficiency of double drones, it often creates positions where one player has a much more efficient opening by getting the tech that is better for the set. Like let's say Conduit first is 100% the best strategy in a set. Well, in that case, P1 has Wild into Wild Conduit, and P2 often just ends up getting screwed over by that. But the new Wild, the one that costs 2E, this one is actually gonna make the balance even better. Similar to the way Doom Drone functions, having a drone that costs 2 is going to make it so that both players can conveniently find an opening that works for them. Like, let's say Blast Forge first is by far the best strategy for a set. Well, now P2 has an opening where they go drone into drone Wild Drone Blast Forge, whereas before, without Wild or Doom Drone or some drone like that, player 2 would have to float 2 gold instead of buying a drone, basically. So it really does help with a lot of openings. It might create a little bit of imbalance in very specific sets, but overall it's going to help the balance a lot. And it's not like super efficient. Like if we compare it to a regular drone, it costs 2, but it doesn't mine immediately, so over the course of 2 turns, a drone and a wild drone are like equally efficient in terms of how much gold you have at that point. However, because it costs 2, of course, it fits in more situations than a regular drone does, and will create some weird more interesting situations in the openings. Like, player 1 now has the opening of double wild engineer on turn 1. Like 2 wilds, engineer, and then 3 wilds the turn after, which is going to create some pretty crazy situations, I think. And being at 2 HP, basically, it's not always going to be correct to kill off the wild drone, because now it's a little bit more resilient than the current wild drone, which is 3 HP and 2 drones. Now 2 wilds is going to be 4 HP for 2 drones. So if we compare that to double engineer, 2 engineers is 4 gold. A regular drone costs 3. So you often killing 2 defense will be better than killing this wild drone. But not always. I think in the early game it'll usually still be correct to kill off the wild drones. And you should definitely be able to deny some absorb doing that, which will make it a good target. But in like the mid game, if you somehow squeeze in a wild drone, it's usually not going to be correct to kill it off. And it's supply 10, so you definitely have a lot at your disposal. Similar to Doom Drone. If we compare it to Doom Drone though, you don't really want to buy this wild a lot in the mid game, I think, because it's so similar in efficiency to a regular drone, and it doesn't give you defense the way a Doom Drone does. I think Wild Drone is probably not going to get bought very often in the mid to late game. I think it'll mostly be something you use to smooth out your openings or to get a huge burst of econ with like 2 double wild engineer turn 1 or something like that. But I'm very, very excited to be playing with this this weekend. I forgot to mention this patch is probably coming this weekend, so that's going to be awesome. So now on to Odin. Its HP is being reduced from 4 to 3, no other changes being made. Lunark provided a huge wall of text explaining this, and I'm not going to go through it, I'm just going to give my opinion on the change itself. So obviously this is going to make it significantly weaker in a lot of situations. Often before, Odin was incredibly strong, just because it's a better absorber than wall. Like if you have no other alternative than wall, then Odin becomes like this insane value unit. And now it's not like a must-have in that situation. It's definitely going to be bought less often, but I think it's still kind of strong. Like you can still justify getting it as long as the triple blue that you invest into your Odin is going to be spent on good units after the Odin. With the current Odin being at 4 HP, you can kind of like, it kind of justifies itself just by being so efficient. Like it doesn't matter what units you buy afterward, you can just buy 3 splitters per turn and the Odin is still amazing. But now that its HP is 3, I think you have to justify the Odin better by seeing that the set has like really good blue units to follow up with. For example, like Drake or Grenade Mech or something like that. I'm not sure whether or not this will actually help the balance of the game. Like the problem with the current Odin is that often getting it first and then following up with Drake or whatever would often just win the game. Like I have a ridiculously high P1 win rate just because P1 usually has the better line to be getting Odin first, and then your opponent is just insanely defensive while you're putting on a ton of pressure. So I'm not sure whether this will fix that or not. Odin just being weaker overall is going to help the balance a little bit, I think. Like you can now do alternative strategies where Odin isn't a must-have. Like P1 may get Odin and it may be okay, but there may be other strategies which are just as good now. Just because it's slightly weaker than before. That's all I really had to say about that. Let's move on to Militia. Now this is a change that I actually contacted Lunark about, because I felt like Militia didn't really add anything to the dynamic of Prismata. Like, it was so similar to Steel Splitter that whether you got Militia or Steel Splitter was usually trivial. And Militia as your first attacker and like clicking it against the wall is usually still weaker than Tarsiers. So I suggested 3B plus sacrifice a drone. And it may seem like very similar to before, but in my eyes that's like a pretty significant buff. It's not going to fit in as many openings because sometimes you would want to like buy 3 drones with your energy and then buy a Militia and nothing else. So it does a little bit restrict your opening options. However, in the mid to late game, this is a significant buff. The value of a drone goes down the longer the game goes, because often by the end of the game you're holding drones just to defend, and at that point they're only worth 2 gold. So being 3B plus sacrifice a drone, in the extreme late game situation, this Militia costs like 5 gold, being 3B plus a drone, which is worth about 2 gold at that point. And because Militia is 4 health, it'll actually help a transition to breach proof where you don't mind being breached. You're just massing damage and hoping to win at that point. In the mid game, drones are worth like slightly less, so it's like a 5 point whatever decimal point worth of a militia, and it's makes the decision between militia or steel splitter much less trivial. Because now, let's say you had 7 gold and a blue, you can either buy a steel splitter or a militia and 2 engineers. And I think getting the militia and the 2 engineers is usually going to be a lot better. Like, that is significantly better than a steel splitter. So I really love this change. It just makes the difference between militia and splitter a lot larger, a lot more significant, and I'm looking forward to playing with this. Let's move on to mobile Animus. Click ability cost reduced from 3 to 2. This is a change that I very much encouraged Lunark to make. Currently, mobile Animus feels pretty inefficient sometimes. Like, if you buy a mobile Animus and then click it for 3 gold, you're kind of spending 7 gold on a Rhino, which is quite weak. You usually don't even want a Rhino for 5 in a red, considering it's one of the least efficient units in the game. So like spending an extra little bit on that, like this mobile Animus currently was very hard to justify over regular Animus. If you buy a regular Animus and spend the second red even twice, it's just as good as a mobile Animus. And if you spend it even more than that, then mobile Animus is just completely useless in that set. So mobile Animus was fulfilling a niche and only fulfilling the niche, and not really being that useful outside of it. And this is going to make it more useful just as a utility unit to use whenever. It's still going to be a little bit weak to buy it and then sell it for 2, but it's a lot stronger than before, so there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to be in a much better spot now, and I'm looking forward to buying it more often. Alright, Sentinel. Cost reduced from 7 GR to 6 GR. HP reduced from 4 to 3. So, some people might think this is a nerf, but it's very much not a nerf. An HP is worth about 2 gold, except you have to take into consideration that Sentinel clicks 3 times before you want it on defense. In 3 turns, saving a gold 3 turns before you lose a health is actually a pretty good trade. Like, you would rather have the 1 gold now than an HP in 3 or 4 turns. This Sentinel is going to fit in a lot more situations. Like, let's say you had 10 gold, a green, and 2 red. Now you can buy Sentinel Tarsier rather than Sentinel Engineer, waste a red, and float a gold. So I really like the change. It's one of the things that really bothered me about current Sentinel is that you can't really justify making a build completely around getting Sentinel, just because it wasn't efficient enough to really justify that. Now you don't really have to make a build around it, and you can just fit it in whenever it's convenient. Costing 1 less gold does make it a lot more convenient to fit into builds. Blood phage. Cost decreased from 8 RE to 6 RE. Build time increased from 1 to 2. Now this is a slight nerf to the unit, which I think was very well deserved. I think blood phage was a little bit overpowered in too many situations, and it forced a lot of openings that really didn't feel great. Just because anytime you're forced into an opening and you lose anyway, it's like the worst feeling in the world to me. So now, because the build time is increased from 1 to 2, you're basically losing a damage, and that damage is usually considered to be worth about 2 gold. So it is being decreased from 8 to 6. That's accounting for the damage. However, you also have to take into account that you're also mining 1 less gold. So phage now mines 1 less gold and deals 1 less damage. However, it also fits in more situations than it does currently. A popular opening is player 2's turn 2 Animus, which you would often waste a red to get phage and drone. Now you can get phage and Tarsier together and not waste the red. And in that situation, this blood phage is as good as before. And in other situations, it's just slightly nerfed. I really like the change. I'm not sure whether or not it'll help the balance. I'll have to play around with it a bunch, and I'll try and share my thoughts in a future video. Alright, here's the units that they decided not to change. So, Redeemer, a lot of people have been saying this thing needs to be buffed because it feels really weak, and I would definitely agree with that. The fact that it is weak kind of makes it pretty balanced, just because the player to buy it first isn't guaranteed to win, just because it's not a very good unit in general. So I would say Redeemer's balanced, and it doesn't need an immediate change, but maybe sometime in the future, when Lunark finally releases Prismata and wants to iterate on the current content, I think a Redeemer buff would be pretty nice. And Bombarder, a lot of people were calling for a 1 gold nerf, including me. I think it's incredibly strong when it's the best absorber. Like, if the alternative is a wall, Bombarder is insanely good. You can just click it once and then hold it on 1 stamina. It gives you an extra absorb over wall, it gives you 4 defense tempo, and it threatens 3 damage still. And it gives you all that after only 1 click. It's pretty insane. When it comes to situations where it's not the best absorber, it's not really that big of a deal. Like, it's still really strong, but you don't have to buy it immediately. But currently, when it's the best absorber, you pretty much have to rush it out after you buy a single damage, because it's just that damn good. And spamming them from that point usually is the best strategy. It feels pretty degenerate, and sometimes it just feels dumb, like when you're spamming bombarders on 10 drones or whatever. So I would have liked the 1 gold nerf. They're still considering it. If you agree that it should get a 1 gold nerf, then let Elliot know. He says he wants to know everyone's thoughts on it. So finally, all these 5 units, Cryo, Windsor, Lance-Tooth, Flame, Animus, Lucina. I'm not really in the camp of people that think Cryo and Windsor need to be nerfed. They do feel quite strong. However, a lot of people are proposing that Cryo go down to 2 health to start with, and I think that's a little bit too far of a nerf. I like that it's stronger than Gauss Charge. I like that you can use 4 Cry-Ray charges to freeze an infusion grid for 1 damage sometimes. And in the case that Cryo is 2 HP, it definitely feels like you have to be a lot more conservative with it. And in some situations, it'll just sit around for the entire game doing nothing, which feels pretty bad. Like, it's just sitting around threatening. Windsor, I feel, is pretty strong, but I like the way it pans out currently. I think any nerf you put on it is definitely gonna affect it quite negatively. It's not an auto buy in every set. Like, definitely, it's very far from that. So I think it's in a fine spot. Lance-Tooth leads to some pretty like mindless openings, in my opinion, and leads to situations where one player wins for no particular reason, but it's kind of inoffensive compared to some of the units that are in the balance patch. I don't feel like so insanely strongly about it that I want it changed right now. So these 3 units are whatever. And Flame Animus definitely feels a lot like current phage, where it forces openings and sometimes you lose and feel really bad about it because there's nothing else you really could have done. And it often encourages low econ openings, which usually don't provide a lot of strategic depth, and you just have to do what you have to do sometimes. But I find it a little bit less offensive than phage. I would like it to be changed in the future. Lunark has just expressed that they don't know how to change it properly. Like, they've considered so many things, and nothing is as good as the current one. So I'll let it fly for now. And Lucy, I haven't really played enough games with it to be 100% on whether it needs to be changed or not, but I think the last nerf they did where they made it cost a red to click was a good choice, and it feels pretty okay right now. I may change my mind in the future, but I don't really think it needs a change right now. And they've basically said they don't have a strong consensus on these units, so they don't really know whether a change is needed or not, or they don't know what to change it to. Now, when it comes to units that I wish were changed but aren't on the list, Trinity Drone and Chronofilter definitely make that list. Those are the 2 units that really bother me the most outside of what's in this patch. Chronofilter enables a lot of combos, and some of those combos are actually impossible to stop. I had a game the other day with Windsor and Chronofilter, and Chronofilter enables a very early Windsor timing, and my opponent got the earliest possible timing where I couldn't get it any earlier, and I couldn't find a way to win after analyzing it for like 30 minutes. It felt pretty bad. There wasn't that many options, so I didn't really have to analyze it for too long to figure out, there was very little chance of me winning. And a unit like Trinity Drone often favors P2 just because they get a smoother opening to get it early. And it actually transposes with the regular 3rd Angie opening, or sometimes just makes a turn 3 Animus really, really efficient. So, I kind of wish those were changed, but I can't complain too much. This patch is awesome. Like, they're changing so many things that I was being bothered by. They definitely listened to the community on this one. I even got a change that I proposed on the patch, which is like the best feeling in the world. So yeah, overall, like, this is a very good patch, definitely going in the right direction. One problem I had with the previous balance patch for Prismata was that they seemed to change units that nobody really had a strong opinion of, rather than the ones that I felt like really needed a change. But with this one, they're definitely addressing a lot of units that I took issue with. So I'm quite happy about it, and I'm really looking forward to playing with the new balanced units. I'll be streaming that on my Twitch channel. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope this was informative. I hope you took something away from this, and I'll catch you guys next time.